Hi, I'm Malessa.
And I'm Candice.
Welcome to The Build Up, where we discuss the secrets of building wealth through real estate.
Today, we're going to be discussing Gen Z's competitive edge in home ownership and breaking down our real estate investing strategy, flipping homes. We're going to be diving into this with our guest today, Christopher Florentino, who's a renowned artist known professionally as Flore.
Today's episode is brought to you by Brown Harris Stevens, a luxury residential real estate firm located in the tri-state area and South Florida. We're here at the Trophy Penthouse of View, New York, located at 368 3rd Avenue here in Manhattan. View is a brand new luxury condominium best known for its unparalleled city views and elevated design. This penthouse is currently on the market for $10 million. If you're interested in learning more, visit their website at viewnewyork.com. So today we're going to be discussing a topic that's been trending in the headlines, and that's Gen Z has been tracking ahead of their parents, Gen Xers, and Millennials in owning homes.
Wow, that is so surprising. I didn't expect that.
Redfin just recently did a study, and they tracked the three generations across the board at age 25, and Gen Z came in at 30%, followed by Millennials at 28%, and Gen Xers at the end at 27%.
Good for Gen Z. I mean, they're always getting major flack, so that's really good to see that they're prioritizing home ownership at an early age.
I agree, but millennials have been financially unlucky. The oldest millennial entered the workforce during the 2001 recession, and then came the 2008 financial crisis when most millennials were in their first job after college.
Wow, so they got hit hard both sides. Is that the reason why Gen Z is tracking ahead of millennials in home ownership?
I agree. Gen Z have been very lucky, unlike millennials, and they did have timing on their side. They began purchasing homes during the boom in 2020 and 2021. And according to a Bloomberg study, it showed that because of the tight labor market during the pandemic, they were able to build up their income very quickly.
So where are Gen Z buying? Here in New York City, we're not seeing a lot of them. So where are they going?
Well, that's a really good observation. As you know, a lot of our buyers here in the city are millennials, and they're really investing here. But again, Gen Z, they have luck on their side, and they're now entering the workforce, right? So they can really take advantage of remote work. And so they're able to work from home. So they're really flocking to affordable places such as Virginia Beach, Cincinnati, whereas millennials, they are more tied to big cities, right? Because they're more advanced stages of their careers. So they have to be where the headquarters are, right? And because of that, they have to invest in cities such as New York City and Seattle, and they're not really that affordable.
No, they're definitely not. San Francisco and New York City are like the two most expensive cities in the country. So that makes a lot of sense. And it's really interesting to see how where you are with your career really impacts if you can take advantage of remote work as easily as others. And I also saw a GBR study that said 59% of millennials, so more than half, are hoping to buy a property in the next 5 years. But they feel the number one factor holding them back is high interest rates and a lack of affordable inventory, which is what you were just talking about, is really the more millennial struggle, being that they're nearer to bigger cities, which are more expensive. So for these individuals, what advice would you give them?
Exactly right. That's a common barrier we've been hearing from buyers who are looking here in New York City. And also you have to factor in inflation. So what I would advise is that you build a team of professionals who are educated. So think real estate brokers, mortgage lenders, and of course, financial advisors, and start preparing for when you do find that property. You should be willing and able and ready to go, right? And these are things that are often overlooked. And lastly, I would say start saving ASAP. The healthier the down payment, the less carrying charges per month. Start preparing right away so, when you do find that property you love, you are ready and able to do so, right? So we're thinking paying off your debt, building your credit, and setting a budget for your monthly payments, such as mortgage, real estate taxes, and of course, insurance, etc. And these are things that are often overlooked. And lastly, I would say start saving ASAP. The healthier the down payment, the less carrying charges per month.
Yeah, saving is so hard. I know I struggle with that myself, but I've always found it easier to save when I have a goal that I'm working towards. So hopefully that can help some of our listeners.
Exactly. So we're going to head into today's investing strategy, flipping homes. This is one of the most well-known strategies, but also really hard to get right, which is what we're going to be exploring today.
Yeah, I feel like everyone in their life has at some point seen an episode on HGTV of flipping homes. There's the famous one, Flip or Flop. So it can be really satisfying to really go and see that whole property makeover process. But with most things with TV, it's never as easy as they make it seem.
For sure. And TV definitely did help make this one really popular, especially recently. Thanks to the pandemic, we've seen home prices shot through the roof. As a matter of fact, the number of homes flipped since 2000 is actually the highest it's ever been.
Wow.
But the profit margins are getting tighter and tighter.
Wow. Yeah, it seems like everyone is really trying to take advantage of flipping these days. And for those who are looking for a project, it can be a very rewarding process to go through. But I think the main advantage of flipping homes is that if you do it correctly, you can get a quick return, which, as you well know, in real estate, it's never a quick return. It's almost always a long-term investment. So it's really nice to have an option that can generate a quicker return, and not everything has to be so long-term. And the other benefit is that, as we always talk about, not necessarily being a landlord is for everyone. So flipping allows you to avoid the ongoing hassle of finding tenants, of maintaining the property, and all the other operational and legal responsibilities that come with being a landlord.
Of course, who wouldn't want to make a quick return, right? But it's not that easy. There are a lot of things that can go wrong with these deals.
Yeah, tell me about it. I'm actually going through this myself. As you know, I'm renovating a home upstate, and I'm experiencing what everybody always says, which is that it's always going to cost more than you think and take longer than you expected. So if you don't account for these things up front when you buy the property, you can really get yourself into trouble and be financially underwater.
Exactly. And investors definitely have to think about things that can cut into their profit margins, such as really high transaction costs, not only on the buy side, but also on the sell side, and good old capital gain taxes.
Yeah. Well, one way to get around capital gain taxes is using a 1031 exchange. And this is a really common strategy that investors use. Basically, you roll the proceeds from one sale into another investment property. And by doing this, you defer the capital gain tax, so you don't have to pay it at the time that you sell your first property.
Definitely. And as you mentioned before, you really have to be very smart, right, at what you acquire a property for. And this is where underwriting comes into play, which is very complicated because you really do have to analyze all of your projected costs.
Right. Yeah, underwriting is very complicated, like you said, especially if you don't have a lot of experience. So one rule that our newer investors who are interested in trying out flipping can take advantage of is called the 70% rule.
And what is that?
So it's basically a quick calculation that tells you the most you should pay for a property. And the way you do that is, first you have to determine what is the after repair value, or known as the ARV. You take 70% of the ARV and then you deduct out your estimated cost for repair. The number you get is the most you should spend to purchase the property.
And how do you get to the ARV?
That's a good question. So you're basically going to be using a comping exercise or a comparative market analysis where you're looking at renovated versions of similar properties to what you have and trying to determine if your property will be also worth something similar. However, like underwriting, comping is also a more nuanced skill. There's a lot of subtle factors that ultimately determine the value of a property. So again, can be difficult if you don't have experience.
And if you don't have experience, what would you advise?
Well, thankfully, you can work with an experienced real estate agent who can really help you with this process. They're trained to look for those subtle nuances, like I mentioned, so that their projection will likely be more accurate than yours, as it's easy as a first-time investor, or if you've only done it a few times, to overlook some really important details that will ultimately affect the end value.
Definitely. I'm a very big believer in leveraging expert advice, so you don't do it all on your own, and that way you really avoid costly mistakes.
For sure. All right, we're very excited for today's guest, Christopher Florentino. He's a world-renowned artist, professionally known as Flore. Chris, welcome to The Build Up.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Chris, thank you so much for being here with us today and chatting with us. We're all New Yorkers here, and we know you grew up in Brooklyn, New York. What was that experience like?
During the time when I grew up, it was, I guess, late 80s, early 90s in Brooklyn, New York, and it was a lot of like graffiti on the streets. There was that culture was still like alive. Now it's really not as much as it was then. There was still like paint on the trains, and it was more visual, I guess, in that sense, in graffiti sense during that time. But just a regular Brooklyn family, Italian family. It was actually inspiring growing up in the city, being exposed to like all the action in New York as being young, and kind of always interested and curious in art and stuff like that. Having the museums access to that was always like a big inspiration from my childhood. But yeah, just Brooklyn's a great place to grow up.
Yeah, it's very different now. But were you inspired by artists local in New York, or where did you really get your inspiration from art?
I would say my main inspiration for like the urban cubism series, which I kind of got known for, was basically like Keith Haring and Jean-Michel Basquiat. Those, my aunt used to take me to the museums and expose me to these artists, and kind of she was like wild in the scene at that time as well, like as a young woman. So she was just very influential in like introducing me to these artists, and that's what really sparked me. Like those guys left such a mark, and they're all from New York, and it was just like something that like was embedded in me when I was young. So that imagery of like a visual language like Keith Haring did, I kind of did do that in my art, and that's kind of like where it stemmed from for sure.
That's so awesome. And when did you know that art was going to be your career path?
I mean, it was a journey. I first started making clothing, and I was a stylist for Nordstrom.
Okay.
And I kind of got the creative bug there because I went to a 2-year school for art. I got like an associate's degree in communication design. So like it was always a path of mine, but I never knew like I can make money doing it. So I was styling for Nordstrom, and I kind of got really into that. I started making my own clothing. And then I quit the job and did the clothing full time, and said, oh my God, like this is something I could live off of. Let me explore more. And then I always was a painter. Mm-hmm. Like I always painted and I always created. So I said, let's give it a shot. And I quit all work, and just when I was 30.
I was going to say, how old were you?
Yeah, I was 30, and I just took the plunge at that point. It was just like, I'm going to do this. And I haven't really looked back since.
I love that, because sometimes people take more risky, life-changing decisions at younger ages. They feel like they have a little bit less to lose. But I love that at age 30, you felt really passionate about just completely pivoting and really following your dreams. So I love that you did that.
Yeah, I'm happy that I did.
Yeah, it's definitely worked out for you. And can you tell us a little bit more about your artwork? Has a lot of messages and meaning and depth to it. And I think people would love to learn a little bit more about what exactly you're trying to convey with your art.
The messages in the artwork in my Urban Cubism series they're either really positive message, trying to like convey the message that we're all like one. Because I feel like we're being divided by so many different things like in the world right now, that I want to just let everyone know, like, yo, we're just one. Connect to the art and kind of feel human, have like a human experience. And the messages usually sometimes they come from song lyrics that like, maybe if you just take a few lyrics out of a song, it's very meaningful in multiple ways. So like you're looking at the painting and you're reading these words, they may mean something to you, but to someone else they can mean something completely different. So I try to like convey a message that's can touch human like emotion, like you can relate to it and touch it and feel it from different angles of just being human. And that's like the main message in those paintings. And yeah, I just try to keep things light and exciting and funny. Some things are engaging where like, what did you mean by that? Sometimes it can be racy. Sometimes it could even be like dark. It's just the messaging is like important to keep the person looking at the painting engaged, because you don't want to just look at a painting for like 3 seconds and walk away.
Yeah.
I want them to like really like dissect it and get involved.
Right.
And the messaging is important to draw people in. Someone can see a message in a painting that can have sentimental value to them, and then they're automatically locked in like, oh, what's the rest of the message? What is he trying to say? And that's kind of that series of paintings, kind of just get the person to engage. You know, not just look at it, oh, it's something pretty, it's a pretty picture, and then keep it moving. I want them to really just like sit there and like dissect what's going through my mind.
I love that.
I love that as well. And that's actually one of my favorite series. I love your painting, and your art is really beautifully in a lot of your collectors' home. And there's just really a great synergy between art and real estate, right? When you think of a beautiful property, automatically a lot of our buyers are like, okay, the next purchase is art.
Yes.
So for you, we know you did invest in real estate. So talk to us about your first purchase.
So actually, my first purchase was directly tied to art. So in 2017, I decided to paint a whole new series. So basically, not reinvent myself, but almost become like a second painter. So I called it the Modernist series. And these are just like traditional abstract expressionist series, like Joan Mitchell, like that type of era, like the 12th Street painters, 10th Street painters, which also we're painting in Soho, which is where I live now, which is also tied to real estate, is why I got that place. But the first purchase was a modern home, original Jean Leedy home. It was called the Ellison Residence. It was actually a famous home. And I wanted to start the modern series there because that was the era where these paintings were actually being painted. And I thought like engulfing myself in architecture from that era will help spark the paintings and make them more authentic. So I painted there for like 7 months, and then I turned it into a mid-century modern experience. So like I collect mid-century modern furniture, and I've been doing that for a really long time. So when you walked into the house, it was built in 61, you really felt like you were in 61. Like from the ashtrays to the cups to the fixtures, everything was period correct. And I rented it like a Airbnb, but almost like an experience where I was booked 90% occupancy for like 3 years. And then that was my first real estate experience. And I did like, upgrades to the home, but I kept it original. Like I did landscaping and things like that, because I think that's very important. Like when you're doing real estate and you're trying to make your investment, be worth more money, I think landscaping and updating fixtures and things that are like noticeable when you're walking through the property. Because when you're looking to sell it, those are the first things that people are exposed to. And if they're not proper, then people get a bad taste off the very like first impression of the home.
Right.
And I think like when investing, like you have to like the details have to be all addressed. And I'm like that in my painting as well. Like the details are so important. So this first house experience was just that. It wasn't like built to be a flip. It was just, almost like an art project.
Right.
Yeah, that's what's interesting is that your architecture inspired your art, and it wasn't necessarily, you didn't go into it intending it to be an investment, but it did. You're quickly able to turn it into a rental property, which it sounds like you did really well. And then since you weren't living there, tell us about the next property that you moved into and kind of how you cycled from, one property to the next and really kind of amassed your real estate portfolio.
So then the next property I purchased was a loft in Miami. It was beautiful place to work and live. It was on an island, like one of those finger islands in North Bay Village. And it was just like a big open raw space when I first got it. Concrete ceilings, concrete floors. And then I was there for about 3 years, and it wound up turning into like evolved 3 times. Magazines covered each evolution of the property. So like there was one version, and then there was a second version, and I think Dwell magazine covered them both. Completely different designs, but the same space. I think that property, I got in at the right time. I mean, the market was really low. I bought it in 2018, and I wound up renovating it for maybe like 2 years on and off, just making it a space where I got familiar with space from this loft. Because with the first home, it was already laid out. This was just 2,000 square feet, square room. And I had to make it interesting, and I had to make it a home. So it was just me like working space out in that piece of property. So I got like the knowledge of space. I got in at a good time, and then I wound up selling it last year for like crazy amount of money. I wind up, we could talk about this. It's real estate, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I think I got in at like $390 and sold it for like $1,090,000.
Wow.
So it was a great profit and a great experience, and I painted probably the best work I've ever painted in my life in that space.
Wow.
I named it the Ghost Loft. So if you Google it, I'm sure you could find articles about it. It was just a wonderful space, and it taught me how to interior design.
Right. That's so amazing how you were able to flip that property. Again, we know it wasn't intentionally, but nonetheless, you flipped the Ghost Loft. You also were able to flip the Leedy's house. So for after Florida.
Oh, yeah, wait, we forgot one. We forgot one.
Yeah.
I just remembered I bought my first flip property with you.
Yes.
And that was a small flat in Asbury Park, New Jersey, which that's where I started my painting career. It's maybe a block from the beach. We picked it up for like $400,000, and I said to myself, I'm gonna make this space just a beautiful place. Like, all the furniture was really designer, artwork was installed properly, and I think we wound up flipping it for like $580 furnished.
But very fast.
Yeah, in 3 months.
Yeah.
It was like a very quick flip, a summer project. And then I skipped steps. It was that property. Then I bought the loft, I believe. Or I'm really not sure.
You have so many properties.
No, yeah. Then the loft turned into the new house, which
Yeah.
I just bought a big house in Boca in a private neighborhood, and I just fully designed that. And Dual's going to cover that as well.
Awesome.
And I think I'm going to sell it to. Me and Candice have been hunting for a loft space here for a while, and I think that's the transition. Sell the home maybe in a year or so when Miami starts to develop more and pushing people north, and flip it into a huge loft live workspace in Soho somewhere.
Yeah, Melissa and I were talking about how hard it is to flip properties. And so the fact that you've done it so many times, you're losing count, and so quickly and for such profits, it's really, really not easy. And that's why we really wanted to talk to you today about your ability to flip, because we know it's somewhat not intentional, but I think you may not realize how hard it is to do what you've been doing. And it's really, really impressive.
And going back to something you mentioned, I mean, you have so many properties that you lost track, which is always a good thing, right?
I don't know how that happened.
Yeah. And when did you decide on your first property that you flipped that you're like, hey, you know what? This is not just a project. I'm going to really flip this to make a profit.
That was the Asbury Park one. That was the first time I ever attempted it in that mindset, approaching it like, okay, I know what this is. I know the neighborhood. I grew up here. I know there's value here. For advice, like if I want to give advice for people who are looking to flip properties, my first thing is pick a place that you would actually live there. That's my number one thing. It's like if you find a place that's interesting and you want to live there, and there's good places to eat and there's some life there, that's like the first step, because it's a desirable place to live. So the property will be easy to flip. Try to find something that's not going to be over your budget. Set a budget for yourself. So like the place that I bought was a small, maybe 1,000-foot studio. And when I looked at it right away, I said, oh, it doesn't need much, just little upgrades here and there. I sanded the floors, made them lighter. Just if you try to follow some trends, some designer trends, and something's outdated and you update it and then stage it well, I think it goes a long way.
For sure.
Especially with flipping property. I mean, when people see a great like professional presentation and you're asking like a good price, I don't see why it would be that hard to move.
Right.
As long as it's in the right location.
And that really goes into the next question about your creative ability. Talk to us about your interior design inspiration and aesthetic.
So my design aesthetic is, I'm obsessed with mid-century modern, but some of it's outdated. But I really love like designer furniture, like Eames and George Nelson is another designer that I love, Alexander Gerard, or all from like the 50s and 60s. But I kind of like mixing that with newer, updated versions of maybe Danish design or something like that. And they always flow, like always flow together. Those pieces are timeless. So if you have something iconic in a house that you're looking to flip, let's say you have like an Eames chair, people already know what it is. Like, oh, wow, that's a $10,000 chair. It's got so much history. It kind of brings some type of like elegance or like luxury items to like a home, but it also is not so loud where it's like gaudy or anything like I think it's a universal design. Like all the furniture and artwork that I do put in my design are universal, timeless pieces. So like you can have somebody that's 65, have somebody 25, and all be attracted to the way I design. So I mean that's kind of the way. And I'm also curious. So like I find something that I love or like I'm attracted to. I kind of like do the research where it came from, and then I kind of build it into the space.
It's so interesting that you've bought and owned properties in 3 different states, 3 different types of property. You've had single homes, you've had apartments, and so you've designed them all very similarly. To your point, you have a very specific aesthetic. So tell us what you're looking for when you look for real estate. What features and characteristics are you looking for?
That's a great question. So first thing, ceiling height. For me, if you have a 600 square foot place and the ceilings are 12 feet, you have an 800 square foot place. Because it visually, when the ceilings are really high, it gives the space like so much more, I guess it feels more airy, it feels more open, and you don't feel really closed in. When the ceilings are low, the windows are smaller, the light, not as much light. I think ceiling height is my first thing I look for. Then obviously I would probably look for windows, because usually in every place that I buy, I want to paint there. So light, natural light is important. Also, when you have like beautiful natural light, it gives you like a good feeling. Like you wake up in the day, you have like proper light. You feel good while you're in your space. So ceiling height, lighting, and then also the most expensive things are usually kitchen and a bathroom. So if you can get one of the two to be where you could live with it and it's updated enough, I think that's a good point where you're like, oh wow, I only need to do the kitchen. It kind of saves on a budget if you're looking to flip, or even if getting into a property with some equity in it. I think those are the things I look for. High ceilings, great windows, great light, great exposure, and either the kitchen or the bathroom being already complete.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, we agree, and those are the things we look for as well. How do you think that as an artist you have a really unique advantage? Do you walk into a place and immediately you envision what you're going to do here and how to maximize its true value?
I think I have an advantage because my life consists of space. So when I'm painting for an exhibition, I know the gallery size, I know the wall height, I know the ceiling height, so I can kind of visualize. I take that skill and say, okay, I'm looking at an apartment. That sofa is 9 feet. I know it can fit here. I know it can be configured this way. Same thing with artwork on the wall. If there's like an eyesore in a room, I know that a mirror or a painting, a specific size right away, just by seeing it. I've bought all my properties off FaceTime. I bought my Soho spot. Candice was FaceTiming me from the loft. I never even walked into it until 3 weeks ago. So I visually have that from art. If I wasn't in the art world, I probably wouldn't have that idea of space and composition, because when I'm painting, I mean, composition is everything in my paintings. Like it has to be balanced. Everything has to be where your eye kind of doesn't stop. And it's the same thing in design and real estate as well. I mean, if something is sticking out, I notice it right away, and I'm like intrigued by the details. So yeah, it's definitely an advantage for sure.
Do you have relationships with other interior designers or furniture dealers or architects that help you have an advantage when you're renovating?
I have some furniture dealers and I have some friends in the construction industry that are beneficial when it comes to designing a place, furnishing a place, flipping a place. I think you have to build those relationships. Just right here in Brooklyn, Design Within Reach Warehouse. Mm-hmm. So they have furniture ready to go. So if you ever have a project or something like that, you need to find places where you don't have to wait 4 weeks to order, a sofa or a lamp. And you have to sometimes when you're flipping a property, you have to have things readily available to you. And having those relationships with furniture places, with an electrician, with, a construction guy that can do sheetrock, all that stuff is so beneficial, because sometimes, time is of the essence when it comes to real estate, and building those connections. If you plan on flipping properties is a necessity. You have to have that.
Something else really unique that I think you have as an investor is you leverage your relationship with publications who cover your work as an artist, but also your property. So talk us through that a little bit.
Okay, so I think that's also a great question as well, because every single time I've ever had my property published in a magazine or an article written about it, it sells a lot faster. So I just, the way I built my relationships with the first magazine was I just reached out to them and was like, hey, look, I have these great photos. I hired a really great photographer and I just submitted it as a package where they just looked over. They didn't have to do anything. So, and that's how I got my first home published, was I submitted it as a package, just like, here, this is what I just did. This is what I designed. Here's the background story. And they were like, okay, this is all we have to do is press print now. You did all the work for us. And then that's the way I built a relationship with a publication. And then once you get into one, they all kind of fall in line. So that's another thing. If you're going to flip property or, you know, develop some type of real estate investments where you're buying buildings and such, like getting proper marketing and building these relationships with these big publications go a long way, because people like to look at magazines to get a design ideas.
Yeah.
And if you're featured in there, oh, wow, this house is for sale. Like, let me get some information on it. I think it's a tool that is very useful.
100%.
We agree. And so what do you envision for the future of your real estate portfolio? I mean, you have a really nice portfolio now, but what is in for the future?
That's a good question. I still don't even consider myself like a real estate guy. I just really love space, and I like furniture more than real estate, and you need a place to put the furniture. So I buy places to hold my collection kind of at the moment. But I think I really am, like I said, I'm looking forward to purchasing a big loft somewhere in New York City so I can live and work there, because I like to be close to my work. And every property that I buy, like I buy it with the intention to paint there. So I think in the future, I think maybe a loft, and I'm looking at a boutique hotel that I want to design.
Where?
So I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
I would like it to be in New York, but maybe financially that may not happen. But that's a project that I'm definitely looking forward to doing. Maybe each room being an era in design and having things themed.
Does your experience as a landlord where you did a lot of Airbnb and short-term rentals kind of prompt you to want to transition that into more of a hotel development?
Yeah, I think it's a good way to invest your money, and it's also fun. It keeps me creative. If I have like a space where I'm constantly flipping things out or changing the artwork, it keeps my curiosity and my collection growing and evolving. So yeah, I think that that's the way I want to go.
I love that. This has been so insightful and interesting to hear from you. I know you don't see yourself as a real estate guide, but you are a lot more than a lot of people out there. And I think that our listeners will really take in a lot of value from everything that you shared today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chris, for joining us today. It was really great discussing with him his background and his transition into being a real estate investor.
Yes, and we'd like to thank our sponsors again, Brown Harris Stevens and View New York. If you're looking for more information on Tower, you can visit our website at www.tower.com. Till next week.